bothered or dared to look behind the curtain of the Wizard of Obama. And then Obama aside, candidates aside, Bill Clinton aside, Winston Churchill aside, Jimmy Carter aside, I mean, the basic institutional reality of American politics is pretty clear and leaves little room, I think, for legitimate disappointment on the part of intellectually serious liberals and progressives. Every 4 years, as Lawrence Shoup, who's this neat left-wing historian and Green Party activist out of California, as he noted a couple of years ago, every 4 years, millions of Americans invest hopes in an electoral process that doesn't really deserve our trust. These citizens qua voters hope that a savior, or at least a more effective manager, can be installed in the White House, raise wages, roll back war, provide universal health care, rebuild infrastructure, bring high-paying jobs, fix the environmental crisis, reduce inequality, guarantee economic security, and generally make daily life more livable in this country. And the dreams are just regularly, over and over again, drowned in the icy waters of historical and political reality. And the actual politics and policy, the electable candidates are vetted in advance by what Shoup calls the hidden primary of the ruling class and by what Ed Herman and David Peterson call the unelected dictatorship of money. By prior establishment selection, viable contenders are closely tied to corporate and military power in numerous interrelated ways. It wasn't just Kucinich and Mike Gravel that didn't have a shot. Even John Edwards, right, mainstream candidate on the vice presidential ticket in 2004, because he dared to raise questions of economic inequality in Iowa, New Hampshire in 2007 and 2008, could not be taken seriously and was pushed to the margins of the media discussion. It was fascinating in Iowa to go to the town hall meetings as I covered the candidates and see Edwards, for whatever reason, I mean, crazy John Edwards, but just knocking the ball out of the park with the best stump speech you're ever going to see about economic injustice and using the phrase working class, talking about poverty. Poverty! You know what's having the dominant rhetoric? Everything's always middle class. Joe Biden's task force for the, for the improvement of conditions for the middle class. And millions of people are being pushed into the working and the lower class. Talking about all of that, and the crowd's going absolutely nuts. And then you turn on the 5:30 news covering Iowa's rebuilding of the caucus, and it's just Hillary Obama, Hillary Obama. Even Edwards has to be pushed to the margins. All the candidates under this system have to run safely within the parameters set by those who rule behind the scenes. Our democracy is at best a guided one. At worst, it's a corrupt farce amounting to manipulation with the larger population, with the larger projects of propaganda in a controlled and trivialized election process. Whatever we think about all of that, it is an illusion, as Shoup says, that real changes can never come just from electing a different ruling class-sponsored candidate. And I think that really is one of the lessons of the last 2 years. One of the reasons I wanted Obama in instead of Hillary, or Edwards too, is I think if that lesson would be more dramatically learned with Obama than it would with either of those others. Now, I do know that many smart supporters of Obama point to the health reform as an accomplishment, and I can't quite agree. I think the bill had some progressive aspects. I'm going to go completely, if I was a congressman, I was Dave Loebsack, the Iowa City congressman, I would have thought long and hard about the bill. I mean, my main issue, I can understand why Loebsack would have voted for it, or the Democrats would have ended up voting for it. The thing that really pisses me off about them is they did nothing in the way of strategy before to have embedded anything progressive, like a real robust public option, if such a thing actually even existed. So it has some progressive aspects, banning denial of coverage on the basis of pre-existing conditions, expanding Medicaid coverage to poor folks. I mean, going to be against that. Any decent progressive would want, but fundamentally a giveaway to big insurance, drug, and medical corporations that leaves those companies cost-driving, parasitic profit calculations completely in place. And those profits and all that paperwork that's associated to denial of care and marketing people and the capitalization of health issues is the main thing that drives cost. And they didn't take care of that. And I'm kind of dogmatic and doctrinaire about this. The only damn thing that would take care of that would be single-payer insurance on the Canadian model, improved Medicare for all. I'm convinced that single-payer health insurance was and remains the only way to go. Obama said that. There's something very much to that effect, and you can find it on YouTube, speaking to organized labor at the Conrad Hilton as a state senator in 2003, but of course he completely abandoned that position when he became a national level politician and a U.S. senator. reflecting his intelligence. Obama's not stupid, he's highly intelligent. His highly intelligent sense that you can't rise to national power without support from Lawrence Shoup's hidden primary in the aforementioned dictatorship of money. The other thing about the Obama bill I should add is that this thing that he and his congressional allies crafted was so complicated and weird. It was like a neoliberal public-private policy wonk's dream and an ordinary citizen's nightmare. That what I noticed that many regular folks, including a lot of people who worked real hard for Obama in Iowa in 07 and 08, just couldn't make heads or tails out of it. What's going on? He's saying private insurance companies are the problem, but he's preserving private insurance. And you know, all the intricate details, which remember when this whole thing was going on, they would change from one week to the next. You know, there's various other things being proposed that nobody understood. My mind goes blank just even thinking about it. And were people going to make sense of it, which I think was sort of the point. American representative democracy. Too much representation for corporations and too little democracy for the people is all about marginalizing the populace. It's about what the great Australian critic Alex Carey's called taking the risk out of democracy. And bills that nobody can understand, I think, are sort of part of that. What about the notion that Obama's election and presidency has been a great victory for racial justice? Some of you may know I have a long history on the race question. I worked for many years as research director down at the Chicago Urban League at 45th in Michigan. I have a whole bunch of book, article, project study, publications on racial justice issues. I occasionally, much to my amazement, get cited as a national authority on race relations and was cited in CNN along with David Roediger and a few other people. I know, I agree with you, you screwed up your face, it was this street guy. And with that as a background, I will add that I am less than excited about the impact of Barack Obama and his presidency on the nation's relations. I mean, it was obviously historic and on one level inspiring to see a black president elected in the land of chattel slavery. It was really cool to hear stories from school teachers in ghetto schools talking about kids, black kids in particular, being excited about national politics and following it, learning how the Electoral College worked, you know, and viewing politics as an avenue, as a basketball, for example, or rap music, as, you know, in the intellectual endeavor that is associated with endeavor. You know, it's a big behind the whole Obama story, you know, as worthwhile endeavors. I mean, there's some role model things there that I thought were very cool. And I sound like an old urban leader in that way, but there's something to be said for that. But then there's the downside, and his election has helped reinforce self-comforting white illusions that racism no longer poses significant barriers to black and minority advancement. And I hear this from whites all the time. Now that view was already there. Americans peaked, white Americans peaked on their willingness to admit that racism is a problem in America a long, long time ago. And their willingness to do that has really gone to hell since the Reagan era, right? You know, and part of that narrative is pointing to successful African Americans, you know, which could just be the black lawyer or the black doctor that lives down at the corner in your block, Oprah, Colin Powell, Condoleezza Rice, some of the black CEOs that emerged. But what puts the nail in the coffin of this notion for a lot of whites that racism could be a problem more than the election of a black president? It's a very common narrative, and I'm surprised at how many times I've been hearing it. Maybe I've been over ready to hear it, but I've heard it a lot. And there's something else here that's worth mentioning. Obama people, for good reasons, David Axelrod. You know, David Axelrod, Obama's main campaign handler, his expertise in many ways. Historically, he started with Harold Washington, then he was Deval Patrick's campaign manager in Massachusetts. A lot of what David Axelrod's been about as a great campaign manager is selling a black candidate to majority white electorates and soothing over their racial fears. Reflecting their hypersensitivity to white racial anxieties, I think Obama as chief executive has been less willing than a white Democratic president, say Hillary Clinton, would have been to undertake any kind of meaningful initiatives against all the different types of institutional racist barriers that continue to be deeply entrenched in the United States today. I mean, the fact of Obama's technical blackness, you know, is a sufficient trigger to white racial fears in and of itself as far as Axelrod is concerned, and has made his administration, if anything, more reluctant than